meeting link. The meeting is also audio streamed through a link located at the bottom of the Assembly agenda.
Dr. Bridges?
Yes.
I can now do roll call.
Oh, wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
So we'll do roll now. Dr. Sharonda Fleming.
Good afternoon, present.
John Simpkins. Jenny Bob.
Present.
Crystal Grant. Lisa Phillips.
Present.
Nadja Trey.
Present.
Sarah Bigley. Luann Llewellyn. Adam Johnson.
Present.
Maureen Stover. Eugenia Floyd. Jenny Watson. Margaret McLaughlin Howard.
Present.
Denise Tillery.
Present.
Michelle White. Andrew Houlihan.
Present.
Valerie Bridges.
Present.
Jeremy Wallace.
Present.
Tanita Filyall Rogers.
Present. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Lucia Riley. David Dean.
Present.
Catherine Oxendine. Simran Fitzpatrick.
Present.
Brenda Stevens.
Present.
Lucy Edwards.
Present.
Tamika Walker Kelly.
Present.
Amy Marshall.
Present.
Tammy Beach. Terrence Ruth. Terry Stoops.
Here.
Stephen Gay. Sandeep Agarwal. And Tina Lance. We have quorum.
Shall I start over?
Sure.
No problem. Thank you. So good afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome committee members, advisors, staff, and online listeners to the March 29th, 2022 monthly meeting of the American Rescue Plan Committee of Practitioners. I'm Dr. Valerie Bridges, Chair of the American Rescue Plan Committee of Practitioners, and I call this meeting to order. Our agenda and materials are available online through the DPI website, www.ncpublicschools.org, and on the SBE meetings link. The meeting is also audio streamed through a link located at the bottom of the Assembly agenda. I'll now read the ethics statement that is required of us. Committee members are reminded that it is our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this committee. Does any member of the committee know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before us at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record. If during the course of the meeting you become aware of an actual or apparent conflict of interest, please bring this matter to the attention of the chair. It will then be your duty to abstain from participating in discussion on the matter and from voting on the matter. At this time, we'll work on the approval of the agenda. Committee members, you've had an opportunity to review the proposed agenda for today's meeting. Do I have a motion to approve this agenda for March 29th, 2022 meeting?
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve today's meeting. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the approval, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? The motion is approved. Thank you. So the minutes from our previous committee meeting on February 22nd, 2022 have been prepared and made available to you. Do I have a motion to approve these minutes?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion. We have a motion and a second to approve today's minutes. Is there any further discussion?
Who was the first and who was the second?
I was the second.
Who was the first to make a motion for the minutes?
David Dean.
Thank you.
We can barely hear you, Renee, by the way.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the approval, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed?
Aye.
The motion is approved. Thank you. Now I'd like to open the floor to Dr. Jenny Corn and Dr. Erin Manuel to kick us off with our Get to Know You exercise.
Thank you, Dr. Bridges. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jenny Korn, the Director of Research and Evaluation on the Office of Learning Recovery. And as we were kind of thinking about the agenda, thinking about the work of this committee, the work that you guys are helping us do, the work that we're doing, and then the focus of this committee is so critical and so important that we really wanted to think about a way, especially as we're just getting started, of providing opportunities throughout our committee meetings for us to get to know one another a little bit better, to help us understand maybe why you were asked to serve on the committee, why you accepted serving on this committee, like really wanting to get a better understanding of everybody's kind of experience and expertise and their passions. And so the way that we thought we would do this first, it's nothing too too personal, I guess I would say initially. But if you'll go to the next slide, Renee. So what we thought we could do, in understanding we have a mix of online and in person, is we pulled out these different kind of student groups that are the focus of a lot of the work that we're doing, either identified by the U.S. Department of Education or groups that we know are really important in the great state of North Carolina, like our military connected students. So what we wanted folks to do, both in person and online, is just take a little bit of a minute reflecting on this list about which student group you think you are on this committee to advocate for. And it's totally fine for you guys to think, oh, I represent all K-12 students. I think that's totally fair, especially, for some of the superintendents and school board members. But are you a parent of an AIG student? I just wanted us to give us a little bit of space to talk a little bit about this. And so we'll just take just a couple of minutes for folks just to kind of think about what student groups they tend to advocate for and why. If you just want to jot a couple things down or put some stuff in the chat, and then we'll just ask for volunteers to kind of share out, not asking everybody to report out. And it can be more than one too, obviously. And I'll be monitoring the chat too while we're having this kind of going around. And then Erin, do you want to talk a little bit, if you go to the next, what you just put in the chat? And I think, Erin, if you put that, if you do the mic, it's right in front of you. Yeah. So this is, we also wanted to give everybody a chance to, throughout the meeting, to reflect. So we'll have some conversation, and then during the meeting, Erin, do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Erin Manuel. I am the newest member of the Office of Learning Recovery and Acceleration. It's great to see everybody in person today. It's my first in-person meeting. We wanted to do just a little poll today through a digital tool called Mentimeter. So what you need to do, and it's also on the screen and also the information is in the chat, we'll need to go either use your device or your phone and go to www.menti.com. Once you go to that particular code or that website, then you will enter the voting code that has the specific populations that Dr. Korn spoke of, and then you are to pick, again, you can pick multiple options as far as I am a student advocate for, and the voting code is 79338098, and it's also in the chat.
And so then at the end of the meeting, we can kind of get a handle, it'll give us a good idea about who we've got in the room and around the table and online. But I don't know if anybody wants to start. We want to take a couple of minutes to talk a little bit about who you feel like you're advocating for. Do you want to go?
Yeah, I'll go.
Okay, great.
My name is Jeremy Wallace. I'm a father of 3 kids. Our oldest son, Charlie, is soon to be 12. Charlie has Down syndrome. I'm here to advocate for him because it's, my wife and I both are, inclusion is what's crucial for us, because it's every time we meet with the school system at Charlotte Mecklenburg School System, it's always why they can't do it. And it's an unwillingness, and the reasoning behind it has always been, well, a lot of the teachers we're getting now are fresh out of college, so they don't know. And it's like, well, that sounds like the perfect plan. And that's, what the fight is about for us. It's always about how do we get away from having these kids put into a room by themselves where nobody deals with it, to being part of the society, because there's no special needs Harris Teeter, there's no special needs gas station, right? It's all about inclusion, and statistically, we always talk about the data shows that it works, and it helps for society, and it helps for the kids, and that's why I'm here.
Great. Thank you so much. That's super helpful. Who else? Who wants to go in the room, and then maybe we could have somebody online?
I will, for the,
Renee, will you go back a slide, please? Sure. Thank you.
okay. I'm an advocate for the economically disadvantaged child. First of all, that I grew up as that child. And I can remember being in school based on, who I was and where I lived, and my family, sort of looked over. But, one thing, I did have a family, I had parents who pushed education even though they were not high school graduates themselves. They were proponents of education, so they did everything that they could to make sure that the 9 of us excelled in school, and we did. So my thing is that we need to push these students who feel that they can't make it or feel that they don't have what the next child may have, and that will hinder them from being successful. So, and I talk with students often, who are in that category, to say, you can be what you want to be, and push the work ethics to that they need to work hard, they need to study hard, and they need to speak up for themselves. So that's where I am.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. What about somebody online?
I can share.
That'd be great.
I am here advocating for all students that are being served by our after-school, before-school, and summer programs across the state. So that hits every single child represented on this list. And really also advocating for those children that are not in programs that should be or want to be, or there's just not a program in their community. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you. Others in the room?
Hi, this is Tina Lance.
Oh, go ahead.
I am here advocating for race and ethnicity. I am a representative from the State Advisory Council on Indian Education. So I am here representing American Indian students to make sure that we are identifying issues and concerns that would affect their academic achievement, and also just keeping everyone abreast on the education policy that relates to American Indian communities and how we can serve our students to make sure they are receiving the appropriate education. And looking at the academic achievement.
That's great. I love how in the chat everyone's like, I advocate for. I think that's such a positive way to think about. Who else?
Yeah, my name is Sandeep Agrawal. I'm here to advocate for all K-12 students who come to our school with a special focus on students who come to us as a public charter school because parents and students make their choice to come to us from all parts of the states and many counties, and specifically students who come from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. That's our focus, and that's what I'm very passionate about.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Terrence Roof. I've had the wonderful privilege to grow up saying economic disadvantage. And the reason why I say it's a privilege is because you get a chance to appreciate education at a particular level. I'm also had a chance as a teacher and principal to serve in high concentration of Black and brown communities. And then also as a researcher, I had a chance to represent the academically intellectually gifted. But my passion is around race and ethnicity, so I believe that's the
Yes, ma'am.
I'll just take it off the top. I'm an advocate for the race and ethnicity because I think it's so important. I didn't have people that looked like me involved in the process of education as I was growing up, and I had so many negative experiences, and I'm sure it was my personality that I stayed in, but had so many students experienced what I experienced. I believe it would have dropped by the wayside, and I wanted to make certain that people that look like me can ride the buses and can be in those classes and not have negative experiences as I had, because I believe all kids should be treated equitably so that we can succeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Others online? Anybody else want to contribute?
I'll contribute. Amy Marshall, President and Founder of Carolina Teachers Alliance. And I'm here advocating for all K through 12 students. Our vision at Carolina Teachers Alliance is an unbiased and academically sound education for all kids. And so I'm here advocating for the kids, K through 12 kids in North Carolina, as well as for all of our educators.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hey, this is Sarah, and I'm here to advocate for students in foster care. And really, they cut each one of these groups, cut through each one of these groups, and they represent some of our most vulnerable and highly mobile students. And I'm very passionate about advocating for them and the needs that they have in terms of especially school stability and completion through high school, and their desire to meet that beyond, whether it's going directly to work or whether that's seeking some sort of higher education. So students in foster care, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Luann Llewellyn, and I advocate for migrant education program students. And as you can see, I'm sure it was unintentional, they were left off the list.
I'm so
and
sorry. That was my fault.
Unfortunately, those students, because they are highly mobile, often get overlooked. So I am their voice until they learn to speak.
Thank you so much. I apologize. That was totally my fault when I was pulling the list. But you're right. I think that's emblematic, and it was an oversight, and I apologize. This is Jenny Korn, by the way. I know.
I'll go. I'm Tamika Walker Kelly, President of the North Carolina Association of Educators. And I am excited to be here to advocate on behalf of elementary students, particularly students who are Black and brown. I am an elementary music teacher, and so I got the chance to teach all kinds of students in my classroom. And elementary is extremely important, and I will just also add early childhood experiences are really important for our students to lay the foundation so that they can have a successful education career as they continue to matriculate through our school system. And so being here and being able to advocate on behalf of all of our students, particularly at the elementary level, is a passion of mine.
Thank you. Anybody else? No, I think we're good. And just a quick note. So I have a 6th grader in a Wake County Public Schools, so I advocate for her every day. But being in the role I am now, I really feel like what I really try to advocate for is the use of data and research and evidence to drive a lot of the decisions that we all make every single day. So I'll kind of say with that, and it looks like we had one more person that wanted to jump on before we move on. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon. I am Naja Tres, and I am advocating for over 25,000 English learners in my district, Charlotte-Mecklenburg School, fastest growing population in our district, and over 100,000 English learners in the state of North Carolina. Our English learners are mostly overlooked and continue to be overlooked, especially during the pandemic and after the pandemic at the state level and the local level. So I'm here to advocate for our English learners. Thank you.
Hi, this is Lisa Phillips. I think I can wrap us up unless there's others. I'm an advocate for the 28,000 plus students that are experiencing homelessness in our North Carolina public schools. This includes our charter schools. I serve as the state coordinator for homeless education, which is part of our federal monitoring and support program here at DPI. We want for all our students to obtain their education that they have a right to, and we want it to be of high quality. And so I'm very passionate for meeting the needs of all of our students, not just while they're in school and getting the resources they need, but being able to prepare them beyond school and to be ready for life beyond high school, whether it's college, military, working, and that kind of thing. So, yeah.
Okay, well, we'll put back in the chat the link to the Menti with the code, but just wanted to say thank you to everybody. It's obvious, I think, why folks were identified as potential committee members. We know it takes time out of your busy schedule, so really appreciate everybody's commitment to this and helping guide this work. It's really important time for K-12 and for DPI, and so really value the expertise on the committee.
I want to say thank you to Dr. Korn and Dr. Manuel. Dr. Korn is our Director of Research and Evaluation, and Dr. Manuel is a Qualitative Research Analyst for the Office of Learning, Recovery, and Acceleration. I want to thank them for the activity. I think it just helps us think about just the pieces, the multiple pieces that make up our students. I don't think that you could look at that list and it's just one. There are multiple layers for students, right? And I think that was part of the purpose of that activity, but thank you for pulling that together for us. I'll now open the floor for Ms. Lynn Barber to introduce our guest from NC High Tech Learning Accelerator and the Innovation Project, better known as TIP.
Thank you, Dr. Bridges. Good afternoon, everybody. Again, my name is Lynn Barber, and I am excited to welcome our special guest today, Dr. Lynn Moody, who is the Strategic Advisor with the Innovation Project, or TIP. As we have previously discussed before this group, as well as at the March State Board of Education meeting, TIP received an ESSER 3 appropriation in the recent state budget, and they are charged with creating the North Carolina High Tech Learning Accelerator, which is a network of in-person learning labs created to help students identify technology-aligned career pathways. TIP will work in collaboration with multiple DPI agency partners, including the CTE team, our Office of Learning, Recovery, and Acceleration, the Superintendent Special Advisor for Workforce, and other supporting entities within the agency to align their program implementation to the state board and agency's strategic goals. Dr. Moody will share more about their work, where they are now, and where they're hoping to be. So with that, I will turn it over.
Well, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be with you all. I just want to, I'll begin. Renee, are you flipping those slides? Or who's doing those? Okay. I wanted to introduce to you the work of the North Carolina High Tech Learning Accelerator. We're currently working on a shorter version of a name, but all the pieces in that name right now really mean something to us. This is for all the students in North Carolina, and specifically for the children that you all listed and you're advocating for. That just really warmed my heart to hear you all say it so loudly and proudly today. And it's about specifically high tech, and it's about learning and how we accelerate that. There are 3 people in our group at this point, and that is Joe. He is our executive director. This project falls under the Innovation Project specifically. He is currently serving as the interim for TIP, and he will move over, and the executive director for the High Tech Learning Accelerator. He will become the executive director of the High Tech Learning Accelerator full-time as soon as Sharon Kateras, the superintendent in Guilford, comes to be our CEO. I am working as a strategic advisor. I've been in the public school serving as a school superintendent for a little over 15 years and retired this past year. And then Amy Cottle is our creative director. And it's just the 3 of us at this point, but you can expect some job postings in very soon. And we hope that you will share them with people that you think could help us accelerate this work. Here's our why. I thought it was great. Thank you, Dr. Korn, for starting with what's your why? Why are you here? But this is our why. You can look at any kind of data that you want to, but our why talks about this was in December of 2021, that 45,000 plus open tech positions would be open in North Carolina. It's up 52%. And if you look, we rank 7th in the country in high tech positions. Yet too few of our learners know about high tech jobs, even though they're going to dominate the North Carolina future job market. If you dig into the data a little further, you'll discover that only about 25% of people in technology are women. And if you look at Black and Hispanic workers, they only make up about 14% of the technology, the high technology divisions, compared to 29% in all other occupations. So you can see we have some work to be done. We began our work by asking a group of students to meet with us. So we already have an advisory council, the 17 school districts that work within TIP, sent 2 students. We did it by Zoom for the last couple of months, and I'll tell you what we're going to do soon. But these were some of the comments. The first question we asked them is, why are students not going into these high-tech fields when they obviously pay high wages and there's lots of job opportunities? And they said, the jobs are intimidating. They're daunting. One child said, it's only for the valedictorian of the class would find themselves in those roles. One child said, I don't have any access to resources or information. I don't even know what you mean. When you talk about high tech, what are those jobs and where would you find those? I live in a rural area. I don't see it. I don't know people who work in those fields. So we know that our students don't always identify themselves early enough to be able to add to that body of knowledge in the field. So our next big task is, and we're super excited about this, is we're bringing in, it's almost 30 students from school districts, and they'll spend 2 days with District C is going to be our provider, and you're going to teach them how to do design work. And so they'll have frameworks in which they'll study, and they will present in a Shark Tank on April the 8th in front of a pretty esteemed audience their ideas about what we would have to do to change education so that students could see themselves in these roles. What do they want? How would they need to see that work? We'll also have an innovation lead from the 17 school districts in an opposite room doing the same work. So it'll be interesting to see when they come out into the Shark Tanks, who has the best ideas, the students or the innovation leads. I'm putting my money on the students. This entire event is being sponsored by Live Oak Bank. They'll do all their work on a very high-tech campus. They'll get to meet with a student. Well, actually, he's an employee of Live Oak Bank. G. Terry, who went to a historical black college and university and finally found someone who encouraged him to at least look at it. And he said, that changed my life from Wendy's to now I work at this bank. And so he'll be talking to the students about how he started to find his way in that work. These are the fields that we consider to be high tech. There are more, but we tried to narrow them down to the 6 that are have the largest job openings, and you will see they are artificial intelligence, software development, computer systems engineering, cybersecurity, data analytics, and design UI UX. So we want to create a really revolutionary, different experience so that students can start to accelerate through, see themselves in and accelerate through these high-tech fields. We probably will not do all 6 of these at one time. I think that is overwhelming. So you can expect that we're going to narrow down to, we're pretty sure that cybersecurity is going to be the first one that we undertake. And I see a lot of noddings ahead, so you're probably guessing the same, for the same reasons that we are. So there'll be lots of job openings in that field. We think that we want to design this in a way that completely is a new way of doing school, that is truly learner-centered. That tends to be a buzzword, and you'll hear a lot of educators talk about being learner-centered, but you won't see that work really happening in schools. Learner-centered means when the focus is really on the learner itself, not about the adults in the building and what the adults are doing, but individually what children need to support their learning, their passion, and their interest. So we're going to try to model that within whatever it is that we design in this design build process. We want it to be industry relevant, which is probably going to be our biggest challenge because the industry is changing every single day. So it's going to require a lot of work to stay on top of what problem-based learning inside of high-tech fields look like for students and how we'll change our design and our work constantly to be real world. When I was in Rowan as a superintendent, I said there's 2 different kinds. There's the throwaway work that children take home and mom puts it on the refrigerator for a little bit and then throws it away. And then there's that real world work experience that are defining moments that students keep going back to and keep wanting to build on and keep pushing forward because it's meaningful for them. So we hope to do that. And then the last one is that it will be competency based. This will not be for an ABC grade. It will be about mastery. They will have a mastery transcript, a digital portfolio that will show their evidence of work as they move along our continuum into the high-tech field. And it will be as they move. So we'll talk a little bit more about that model as we go. We see this as having learning labs across the 17 inter-district network. And I said this is for North Carolina. So we'll incubate inside of districts. And then in 2 years, our hope is to roll it out to every school district in North Carolina once we have a strong model. And they will have opportunities to work with each other. Dr. Bridges can tell you that I laugh about us doing this inter-district networking. I was working with the superintendent yesterday. Superintendents don't play well together. They don't like to share resources. They like to be the best at whatever they're doing. Their school district's number one. In this particular environment, there'll be a student, there may be 2 students from Wake County working with a student from Vance County and a student from Mount Airy solving a real world problem for IBM, working as a team together. There may be a teacher in one of those school districts that might be teaching some content, or there may be a CEO of a large high-tech company at 3 o'clock on a particular afternoon that speaks to all of our students that are in the high-tech accelerator. So that will be different. Here's what we've done so far. So the state board just approved our contract. We're waiting for a signature and a bottom line. And, but we have already created a student advisory team, and we've met with them twice. And as you know, they're all coming. I will have to tell you about the student advisory team coming to Wilmington. They all have their own hotel room. And for the students that are coming, it's a very diverse group. And the comments and the things they've asked, 5 of our children have never seen the beach, so they will get to see the beach the evening of their dinner. Several of our students have never been in a hotel room before. One of our students said, "Can I bring my grandfather? He wants to do this with me." So there's been some beautiful family stories along the line as we've designed the work. This is, we are going to launch our brand identity soon. We've been working with it. We know we've got to change our word to be something a little catchier than the North Carolina High Tech Learning Accelerator. And we're looking for colors and a logo, and our students have been in the process of helping us design all that work, what appeals to them. And then we have been meeting with all 17 school districts. I was in Hope County yesterday working with their team. So our updates, we also spent a lot of time with these groups. We've talked with My Future NC and the North Carolina Business Committee of Education, the Chamber, the Hunt Institute, the Friday Institute, the Governor's Office, the North Carolina Community College System, the universities, and of course, we've had tremendous support from the department here. We've been meeting with high-tech employers on a pretty regular basis, getting some input, and that's been an interesting process in itself. So we have lots of high-tech companies that are really anxious to support our work. Ms. Goodnight told me yesterday at the legislative retreat that she was wondering why we went to Live Oak Bank and wants to know why the students won't be on the SAS campus soon. So I'm sure that's going to happen in the very near future. We will. We met with national educators and innovative partners, people like District C and Transcend Education and Education Reimagined, and people who are thinking about education very differently. So coming soon, we are going to begin a small advisory board, and we will add to it at some point this summer. We want to be really strategic about who is on that advisory board. We will have a business convening after we've met with teachers and students and had a lot of input. We will bring our business partners in for convening to give us some input into our design process as well. And we've been developing a logic model so that this framework can be used for other design thinking as we move. We have a partnership with District C, and we'll continue that work as part of our middle part of our experience. We have the design sprint coming up. We'll start to hire some staff, we hope. In April and May, our postings will go out, and our official launch will be in mid-May. So we will do some type of press conference. We're just trying to think of something that's a little bit more innovative than a press conference to say that we're officially launched. I will explain to you all that don't know anything about it. We didn't really add a slide in to say how we're envisioning this work. So I'll just take a minute to do that and open up for questions. We see this as a continuum. We know that school districts have great best practices all over. They'll have a STEM camp that's wonderful, or they'll teach coding to middle school students. These links tend to be broken, so a student might have an experience and get real excited about high-tech industry and then not know what to do for the next 2 years. And then they'll have another experience. So we want it to be a continuum. So there'll be some type of exploration for students. So I think about, like, they get to try it on. How does it feel? One student said, I think that's for the guys who sit in the basement at night. They're fat, they eat potato chips. Like, no, that might not be. We know you have that vision. So how would it feel to be a person that worked in that particular industry? And then the deep exploration that we talked about, where they'll actually be solving real world problems. And then how do you navigate the careers? If you know anything about the high-tech field right now, the career navigation is a wild, wild west. There's credentialing. There's four-year schools actually offering 24-week programs now. There's how do you pick as a student, and how would you know? Our guidance counselors are just not prepared to help guide students into the high-tech fields because it's just changing so rapidly and not necessarily anything that they would have a background in. So we'll have all three of those components. I liken it to the Boy Scouts. If you know anything about Scouts, you know the troops meet all over. So these learning labs could be anywhere. They might be at the high school, they may be at a church. When they come together, they have a Scout leader. We will have some kind of facilitator. They may be a teacher, they may not be a teacher, but we'll have a facilitator to help them with their learning. They'll have some kind of handbook that'll help them figure out how to get badges and ranks. So we'll have some kind of continuum where it'll probably be digital that they can go to, and they'll have choices. If I want to experience it, there's 30 things that I could pick to do, but I only need to pick 5. I get to choose how I want to experience that as they go through the entire continuum. And they can dig as deep as they want, and they can continue as far as they want, all the way from eventually early elementary through high school. So how it will look, you will have to stay tuned with us as we go through our design build process as we develop this, but we're very excited about the opportunity. I will leave it to that with questions, Dr. Bridges.
Absolutely, yeah. So open for questions, clarification.
I have a question. How were the 17 districts selected?
There is the Innovation Project, which is named TIP, is the short name for it. Most people know it by that. There's 17 school districts that are currently members of TIP, the Innovation Project. And for over about the last, I think it's around 6 to 7 years, it's a nonprofit organization where school districts pay a membership to be part of. And the districts participate, and TIP has lots of projects. And this high tech is one of those. So those districts have elected and chose to participate in the 3 things that TIP stands for is transparent design, equity, and innovation. So they are school superintendents and districts who want to work on those 3 things, and they work on those 3 things together. So they have a number of other projects. We chose to work with TIP in the beginning because there's 115 school districts in North Carolina. It's really daunting to design something with that many. So this was a group of districts who were already working together in an innovative space.
I have a question, Amy Marshall. Actually, 3 questions, and I can type these in the chat if needed. But my first question is, could we get a copy of the line item budget for the entire project for which the $8 million was awarded? That's the first question. The second question is, what exactly did TIP do or submit to be named for the $8 million? Was that a proposal? Did you have to fill out federal paperwork? Whatever it was, could we get a copy of that? And then the third thing I wanted to ask for was, can we see a copy of the contract with the SBE?
Yeah, I'm sure all 3 of those things are public.
So I can speak to the documentation. The contract is one and the same. There isn't a separate contract with the GA and the state board. So I'm Lynn Barber. I'm the business owner of this. This appropriation, so yes, this was an $8 million appropriation from ESSER 3, which of course we are the ARP Committee of Practitioners, which is overseeing the ARP funding. This was an appropriation through the General Assembly, and because it was over the threshold, I believe $500,000, it did go before a state board. We did a presentation in March. Essentially the executive summary was approved, and the contract, I think as Dr. Moody referenced, is still under review and signature. So I'm happy to check with our legal counsel to see where that stands. Obviously everything within the agency is public record. I just want to make sure I'm pulling forth the correct version of the contract. So I can work within the agency and Dr. Moody to get that contract. Hopefully it will be signed soon. It's been a work in progress for a couple weeks now. But I'll let you, Dr. Moody, speak to the other requests. The submission to the GA for the appropriation.
Sure. Yeah, we're happy to provide. I think you asked for 2 different documents. I'm sorry it didn't show up in the chat and I wasn't writing it down.
Yes, I just was wanting to get a copy of what TIP submitted to be considered for the 8 million. What was submitted for that? What kind of application or proposal was actually submitted for that? And then I wanted to get a line item budget for how the 8 million would be spent.
Sure, yeah, the line item budget would be in there. Yeah, I don't see any problem with any of those. We can push those forward.
Thank you so much.
Looks like there is a question in the chat from Terry Stoops. Any plans to offer programs to public charter schools?
Actually, yes. When we talk about all the students in North Carolina, we hope if we're able to develop this, we're a little bit behind because everything that you plan like 6 months later before the General Assembly actually passes the budget and you get started. So you feel like the time clock is already ticking in your design process. So yes, the goal is that it would be open to all students in North Carolina.
I have a question. So first, I just wanted to say this sounds like a really exciting project, especially since it helps bridge students from being tech consumers to tech creators, and that's one of the things that we really want to do. I know my home county, Cumberland County, is one of the 17 districts that are in this program, and wanted to know, are there future plans to partner with colleges or community colleges in the respective areas? For example, Fayetteville State University has a growing cybersecurity program, and so I'm wondering if those connections are being made in those districts.
The answer is yes and yes. We have started that work and we'll begin that work. Dr. Pamela Baldwin is now at Fayetteville State, and I've already contacted her. Like, we were supposed to have lunch last week to talk about the program and how to connect the program. So absolutely. Apple has a strong partnership with all the HBCUs and in the tech industry, so they are helping us align some of that work and showing us how to get involved in, I think it's called the Farm Project that they are working on. So yes. Our challenge right now has been, we have met with so many people, and now it's to actually design some work with what we know or what we're hearing so that we can actually launch something in August for students to start experiencing, so we can build it and make it better and make it stronger.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I take my dad hat off, put my TV producer hat on. How are you telling this story? Is there a marketing piece of this where you're letting the kids sort of tell the story to give a visual representation of how it's progressing? Is that?
Yes, so the story will begin on April the 7th with that group of students. So we've hired a videographer to video them for 2 days.
Okay.
And we've asked for the whole B-roll, so you'll know that terminology, so that we can share what students are saying about their learning experiences and how they want to learn it. And more than willing, everything that we're working on, we want to share with everybody that we can. We have Amy Cottle, you saw the creative creative director. She's pretty good at design work. So she's helping us to try to capture and tell the story, but we need help with that. I mean, it's an ongoing process.
I can eat up the rest of the meeting talking about it.
Yeah.
Happy to chat with you afterwards if that's okay.
Yeah. Yes, would love to.
Dr. Moody, I just want to throw something at it. I was a little slow, because when you put TIP up there, I'm from the Triangle. So of course we say TIP.
Yeah.
I think in terms of the talent identification program.
Yeah. Right.
Right. So, and that just...
Often people confuse those two, yes.
Yeah, because it wasn't written out. I know, and I was like, how does that connect? So I think I missed a little, because I was thinking, well, how does the temple do it? So then,
sorry, I apologize, I did that.
20 miles down the road, it goes, oh, it's different. But I got it.
And your TIP stands for what? I missed that.
The Innovation Project.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
See, it took us taking a while.
That's okay.
My struggle was I had 10 minutes to tell you this story.
Oh yeah, right.
And I wanted like 3 hours.
Oh yeah, that won't work.
How do you? I know you've been sort of nurturing a relationship with these districts for some time, and you have amazing executive team that's been good relationship. It's been a consistent team with good relationships. How are you determining the readiness level of these 17 districts? The readiness level of the students you select to enter this phase? Like, are you still working to standardize that? Like, how
That's a really hard question. So TIP, the people join TIP, they volunteer. You know, like any other organization, like Dr. Bridges' Edgecombe is a member of TIP. I don't know how long you guys have been in TIP, but for a while, since all the beginning, right? Because they read about it and they want to be part of that. And we did a lot of work around Restart Schools in the Innovation Project. So some school districts joined to get additional help in thinking about that. We've had lots of other projects about teacher readiness and teacher preparation, and some of TIP is grant funded, as well as districts pay membership dues to be part of it. So they've got to want to. I know what we do have additional school districts that are asking to be members now, and we never want to grow it statewide. We just don't, we want it to be a network, not a statewide agency, because we have statewide agencies that do a good job of innovation. So, and districts decide to drop out with new leaders coming in, and new leaders come on and they want to add in. So it's kind of a roving door, to tell you a little bit. Some members have been a member for a long time, and some are new members this year. The readiness for students is a really interesting question. So I just had a conversation, and we're going to follow up with, we want to be able to figure out a way to push something out to all students. I hate to say survey or assessment, but I'm thinking in that line, to be able to find the aptitudes of students, not the IQ, but their aptitude for high-tech jobs, like the characteristics, like can you multitask? Do you like to solve problems? So that we can identify those students and start reaching out to students to say, so it's not, well, I'll send you to STEM camp because I like you and you're so-and-so's son, or you said you wanted to go and you were looking for something to do this summer. But they already are showing the signs of aptitude, so we can identify them. And obviously, a huge part of the project is to try to figure out all those students that are not engaged in school, that they weren't engaged before the pandemic, and they're really not engaged now, how to pull them back into something that's exciting and that they can see themselves in that role in a different, engaging way, so that we don't lose that talent pipeline that we so desperately need to fill in North Carolina. That's the real goal.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I know you all may have, did anybody have another question?
Yes, one last question in the
sure.
chat.
And then I just had a quick follow-up.
Okay,
Thank
absolutely.
Will you supply a list of research studies that support this approach? And this is a question from Terry Stoops.
Of research studies that support this approach. I just hesitate for a minute because we have not defined the approach yet. We only have a theory of action at this point, but as we do, we will certainly collect research and data on that as we move ahead.
And so with all of these ESSER 3 appropriations within the contracts, at least those that our office is business owner of, we have written in there that the groups will come and present before this body, this committee. Most of them are annually, so the Innovation Project will be back October 2022 and October of 2023. We have to give a 30 days notice if we ever want anybody with these appropriations to come and present to us. Again, if it's not within the contract, but again, like if you want, them to come back and present to us on an update, we can do that as long as they give a 30-day notice. So they will be back, and we will hear more.
Hey, Lynn, we have one more question from David Dean.
Sure.
Hey, thank you. I enjoyed your presentation. A question to you specifically, Dr. Moody, is, you have a limited amount of time to spend these funds. Do you have a plan for, and this is an ongoing program, do you have a plan for continuing funding past that end date of the ESSER funds?
Part of our work is to try to look at how we have this inter-district collaboration. and what it actually, after we design it, how we can sustain the work within it. So once we've built the platform, for example, to maintain that platform will cost a lot less money than it will to design the platform. Once we identify what a learning lab looks like and where they are at, we are hoping that it will, and we prove that it works, then it's easier for superintendents to make decisions about repurposing money towards an effective practice. So part of it is to show that it's an effective practice, or more effective than another practice that they may have to choose between and for. So we hope that we can get most of the design work done in the next 3 years, and that we have discovered ways between interdistrict networks to sustain the work through the collaboration of the work. So we will be, part of the budget was to look at, or part of our draft thinking in a budget was to find a finance person to help us study that as we continue the project.
Okay, have you laid out measures of success for, say, year 1, year 2, year 3? And if so, could you share them with us?
We have not yet.
Okay. And this is kind of a comment, not necessarily for you, but maybe more along the line of Amy's questions. I think if we're asking Dr. Moody to be transparent, maybe we could be transparent in our questioning as well. Amy, it sounded to me like these questions that you're asking Dr. Moody, you're questioning the process by which the funding was granted. Is that the case? I mean, I don't see our role, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see our role as a committee as questioning the process that the state has set up to grant the funds.
I was just interested in seeing the details in what the application had, what criteria was used to award the $8 million, what specific criteria, and what are the details of this program, including the budget. It sounds good, but I just want to know, exactly how the $8 million is planning on being spent. Also, definitely want to see the contract to, see what all the details are and when the money is going to be paid and on what dates and all that. But definitely just want to do due diligence and understand fully what exactly this project is.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it sounds like something is needed. And if anybody's paying attention to economic development announcements like today, we know we're going to need more technology minds. So wish you well, Dr. Moody.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful. So thank you, Dr. Moody. Fantastic presentation. Lots of clamoring and excitement around it. Looking forward to the progression and participating as well. Absolutely. So now we'll open the floor for Mr. Alex Charles, Section Chief of Federal Programs Monitoring and Compliance with the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. He's going to do an overview for us of ESSER 3 and expenditures of funds updates.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. I am Alex Charles. I am Section Chief of the Federal Programs Monitoring and Support Division. Everybody's beginning with their why. So why do I do what I do? I think the biggest thing here is I want to really be a voice for some of those most at risk, most vulnerable, really some of those categories that get overlooked, as Ms. Llewellyn spoke about earlier about the MEP. So within my division, we work a lot with our homeless, we work a lot with foster, with the migrant, with really a lot of schools and families that are poverty stricken, and really looking and pushing toward that equity, that good education, the quality education for all students. So that's really what a lot of our funds are to be used for. So as we begin to go into where are we at, give a quick overview of ARP, our ESSER 3, as it's called, because this is a third stimulus package. I'm sure most of you are aware of that. We had ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3. They did grow in value with each one. So ESSER 3 really is our largest stimulus package. And I really want to hit on this last bullet point here. It really has a broad range of use when you look at ESSER 3. But really, we have to look back and we have to always push and vet all of our expenditures in that prevention of, reduction of, and response to COVID, because these are pandemic response monies. So I get to be the joyous voice sometimes that has to say no when people when people send expenditures across, but also get to say yes. And just so you know, if we do have to say no within our division as far as expenditures go, it usually is you can't do it that way, but let's talk about what you're trying to accomplish, and let's see if we can work toward a way that we can get your goals accomplished. We can help your students in a way that would be allowable. But again, we always have to go back to that prevention of, reduction of, or in response to COVID anytime we're talking about ESSER expenditures. So when you're looking at the 90%, just to give you, you may already know this, but just to give you sort of a vantage point of how much money we're talking about with ESSER 3 or ARP. We have at least one subaward, so one PSU within our state, that they're 90% that went directly to PSUs. So the PRC 181, that amount of money for that one PSU was greater than our whole entire state Title I allotment that we get from the Department of Education. So we're talking about a lot of money here, and a lot of money rushing into the districts, layered on top of ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 to really help us, again, respond to COVID, come back from COVID, prevent the spread of COVID. But the way that those funds were broken down, the way they were allotted, is 90% had to go directly to the PSUs. So that's PRC 181. From that, we have to set aside 0.5% for administrative costs. That is written within the law. So that's not a number that we had any choice in. That was written to the law. And that is to pay the state to oversee the grant. And from there, then you also had 9.5, which was a state reservation. So the General Assembly is what divided that pot of money up into several smaller pots, which we were just talking about one of those pots of money a few minutes ago. And I've been told that you're aware of what those pots are, but we do have a chart later on that talks about the different pots of money, the different applications that our division oversees for approval, and sort of how that looks. And I'll walk you through that process in just a second. So let's talk about the application process. So when you're looking at this slide and the next slide, you're seeing a chart, and you're seeing all the different PRCs. So every one of those pots of money that the General Assembly appropriated, they all have a different PRC. They all have a different purpose. And so as you move over to the fourth column, you'll see the initial application. So that initial application is when they're first applying for funds. So anytime with a federal fund, with this being appropriated to the school districts, they have to have an application on file. So there's an application for each of them. And then for our bigger pots of money, there's also a continuation application, which is that fifth column. And then, of course, you got to also have your carryover budgets so that you're constantly keeping your money budgeted throughout the life of the grant. So those last three columns will give you some information as far as how the application looks. Is it just an initial application and then there's no continuation? Is it initial application and continuation application? And as far as the budgets, and now that has to look for when the money is budgeted and how that's approved for the different expenditures. So I sort of have some of this written out on the next slide when it comes to what does it look like. So the initial application is going to be completed the year the funds were allotted to the district. And so then there's a continuation application, like I said, for those bigger grants. That's really going to be your 181, your 182 that went out for all your PSUs, part of that 90%. So they're going to be completed each year that carryover funds are available. And what this does, this allows the PSUs to keep their initiatives current. So they're able to update, and those applications adjust to the money remaining. So every year, it's not taking in consideration the entire amount that was allotted, but it's taking into consideration the amount of funds remaining at the beginning of that programmatic year, which would be that July 1 start date for that year. So that previous chart, like I said, indicated when the initial applications were due, and when the continuation applications, if there is one, was what is due and will be approved. All approved applications are public record. So while the PSU is going through that approval process, it is not public record because we're going back and forth. We're making sure that everything's allowable. We're making sure they're doing things right with their money. They have everything done appropriately. But once it is approved, you can go to that website, the ccip.schools.nc.gov, and you can see any application across the entire state, and that is publicly available. So what are some resources that you may find useful? So I gave a link here to our website regarding ESSER funds. I've also given a link here to the Financial Business and Services website. So that's going to have some more general information. It's going to have some monitoring pieces in it. It may have the way funds are allotted, how much was allotted. One of the big things here that we have to conduct within our division is looking at that compliance piece. So a big part of our ESSER is looking at monitoring. And so just, every PSU received ESSER funds. Every PSU over a 4-year period, and we're in year 2 of that, will receive a monitoring from our division, making sure that things are done programmatically correct. The goal there is support. The goal there is to make sure that we don't have gaps. So if the federal program, if the U.S. Department of Education comes in to monitor us and the PSUs, that they don't find faults with the way money was spent. Because if they do, then that basically means that payments have to be repaid, and we don't want any district having to repay funds. So if you look here, you're going to see that the major expenditures to date. And so this is that last link. If you click on that last link, it takes you into a nice platform where you can search and gives you some data visualization. And so what you'll see on that slide, you'll go forward to, you're going to see the big circles is what's going to tell you where the majority to date of PRC 181, which is that big 90%, have been spent. So the majority of them have gone towards salary and benefits. After that, you've got that software and materials. You've got a little bit of capital outlay, supplies, materials, a little bit of capital outlay, some contracted services, and then some other. So that's where the majority of the funds are going. And again, this is from that last link I gave you. The next slide now shows what is the balances remaining. I showed a quick little screenshot because, like I said, you can go into that link, publicly available, and you can do all the searches you want and really drill down. But what you're going to see here is there's a lot, if you look in that percent remaining category, there's some that have 100% of their money remaining. There's some that have 95. You see very, very few that are really below that 70% mark in this screen grab. Why, you may ask? So the next slide, I go into some different reasons of why we may have some high expenditures. For the first part, we really encourage them to spend them first in, first out. And what that means is ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3 have almost, not exactly, but almost the same allowability for uses. And so what we're going to encourage them to do is to create a comprehensive plan for not just ESSER 3, but also ESSER 1 and 2. And so as they're spending money, they should be drawing from ESSER 1 first, then move to ESSER 2, then move to ESSER 3, because the money expires in that order. So ESSER 1 expires this year in September, ESSER 2 expires next September, and ESSER 3 expires in 2024. And so in order to make that money last, in order to continue to carry out initiatives through that period of availability, and I do apologize for that misspelling right there, availability. Somehow spell check and myself didn't catch that, so I apologize for that. But in order to be able to carry that out, PSUs are sort of really trying to manage their money so that they are spending ESSER 1 first, then ESSER 2, and then moving into ESSER 3. Also, some initiatives do require a longer runway. So some of your construction projects require a lot more preparation to be able to spend. So that's another reason why some of the funding may not be spent at this point. So some important information and updates. Right now, we are currently in the middle of rolling out that 10% set aside that the General Assembly has appropriated. So we have processed through one set of budgets, one set of applications. We're currently in the middle of approving what we're calling the Combined Shell 2, or the Arp Combined Shell 2. So we're in the middle of approving all those applications, getting funds out the door, and we'll have another round of those coming out over the summer to finish out those that 10% set aside that was legislatively appropriated. Also with ARP, there's also a requirement for maintenance of equity, just to make sure that you guys are aware of that. So there's a maintenance of equity requirement that we are getting ready to do the first calculation of. And what that is we've got to make sure that state and local expenditures or state and local money flowing into the districts has not reduced due to the pandemic money, due to ESSER3. And so there's a couple of tests that have to happen with that, but we're just starting now to create the exemption list, and then they'll do the calculations of that later on in the fall for this current school year. We're also looking at a way, because with our ESSER3, that we have to be able to spend 20% on addressing learning loss. And so we're trying to come up with some ways of really capturing that and really ensuring that we are meeting that 20%. So one of the ideas we have out there floating right now is possibly putting a 99 at the end of that budget code to be able to really capture what money is being spent toward that 20%. I know I went really quickly through that, but at this time, if there are any questions, I will gladly respond to those. All right, so I'm reading one in the chat right now. At this time, many times, because there are sometimes ways that we can look at money that's being spent for different areas, but in a lot of cases we can't. But just because of the way the plans are, they're sort of incorporating and they're blending different resources in together, and it's all based upon the need of the district. And within our account codes, we don't always differentiate between the different ones. Now, there are some account codes that are specific, and like to some migrant, there are some that are specific to your EC division. And for those, we can pull out, but it's not going to be a complete picture because some of the general type initiatives that are being done are also going to benefit your economically disadvantaged, your migrant students. They're also going to benefit your EC students. And so there's not a clear-cut way to really dig down deep and see how much is spent by category.
And this is Jenny Korn. I'll jump in quickly, Alex. There's at least two different research studies that have been funded, and one of them has a focus on local spending. And basically the research question that got funded was about how local spending is impacted by this huge influx of money by the federal funds. And so we'll have a researcher who's an expert in Dr. Bridges, you might remember, his name is Eric Hauk. He's faculty at UNC Chapel Hill. His area of expertise is school finance. And Alex, we met with Alexis Schaus and Jennifer, and just as it got funded, to kind of try to shape the question a little bit. So I think Dr. Hauk has been working to shape that question a little bit, but it could give us some answer that isn't totally reliant upon state budget codes. Do you see what I'm saying? It might not be statewide, but we might be able to pull out a sample of districts and be able to dig in a little bit, because I think Jenny, your question's a really good one, and one that we keep getting again and again, not just from the Arp Committee, but from legislators and from how do we know what the impact is, and even the U.S. Department of Education. So I think there's an opportunity maybe to think about in a strategic way how we might be able to answer that question.
Absolutely. So I see another question here in the chat about more details on the 10% set aside. So the 10% set aside is, we had to get 90% out to schools, 10% were held back. That went to the General Assembly, which then split that up. Of that 10%, 0.5 was mandated to go toward administrative cost. The other 9.5 was split up into the different buckets or different uses. And if you go back to the table that was in my presentation, it outlines the majority of them, the ones that are running through us. There are a few more out there that did not run through my division that aren't on here, but if you go to the finance and business link in that, you'll see a full listing of all those. So the financial business services, there's a lot of policy manual that talks about each one of the grants, gives details about what they can be used for, and it'll walk you through all those different appropriations from the General Assembly that came out of that 10% set aside.
I think another thing we're doing is the ARP. I confuse it with this group. This is the committee of practitioners. There's an ARP Community of Practice, which is through the National Comprehensive Center. And so there are a team of us, a small team of us within the agency that are working on solving essentially like a problem, right, around the funding. And so one of the things that Dr. Manuel is working on is to code that 20% that has to go to learning recovery interventions. And so we're coding what the plans say districts wanted to do, and we all know, especially the superintendents in the room, that the plan when it was submitted probably has changed and will change given the multiple appropriations that have come out. And there's still 2 more to come out. So those will evolve. So we kind of want to know where the districts or where the PSUs thought they would be with that 20% in terms of purchasing or paying for types of interventions or staffing, and then where they end up in terms of the expenditures. So that's a project that our community of practice is working on in partnership with Dr. Manuel.
And that would be something we would partner with federal program section chief, like when and if that budget code becomes part, like the 99. Right? Right. We'd be able to connect those 2 things. You see?
I'm going to follow up on that.
Yes.
Yes, because I don't know if that happened.
No, it probably hasn't happened yet, but it could, and we could compare and say, like as Aaron is coding, right? Qualitative systematic coding about how districts said the different buckets they said they were using for recovery. Because that's another question we keep getting from the legislature. How is everybody defining, targeted recovery? And we're like, some is teacher retention bonuses, some is, it could be high dosage tutoring. And so thinking about how those codes go and then looking at that 99 budget code.
Yes. Which I'm going to send an email about right now as a follow-up. Thank you so much for that reminder.
You're good about sending those emails. I just got
And looking at that 20%, that's when we're really trying to wrap our head around that and how to track it. Because with some of that, with some guidance from U.S. Department of Education, different things like that, there are certain things that would qualify in that 20%, certain things that wouldn't qualify, just because of the way that the law is written. And so that's what we're trying to do is really come down to, as we'll say, that, how do we track that? And also, how do we make sure that we're communicating with the districts clear guidance so that as they're truly playing the 20%, that they are staying within what truly counts for the 20% and not going outside that.
Mr. Charles, thank you for your informative presentation to the committee. We're now going to open the floor to Dr. Jenny Coyne to present the SAS or SAS report, Impact Analysis of Lost Instructional Time to the committee.
Thank you, Dr. Bridges. Okay, and so how are we doing on time from like the agenda stuff? Like, we're a little behind.
We're a little off.
Okay. Because we can also, I'd rather be flexible, and we can push. Kaylin and I were just chatting about maybe we could tighten up the remote learning survey or just introduce it, that next section, and then maybe push the discussion to maybe a meeting of the data subcommittee that we're going to talk about a little later. But so a lot of you guys have maybe seen some of this, so we'll maybe just hit the highlights for the group. I think
like 10 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, like 10 minutes. That's it. That's all. Okay. Sure thing. Okay. So part of our role, as you guys just heard me mention, is to try to connect research and evaluation to these decisions, these evidence-based policy decisions we're making inside this building and in partnership with the local school districts. And so we have become kind of the hub around these pandemic recovery studies. The first one is the one we're going to hear about today, and we've mentioned some of these other ones to you guys, but we'll continue to report out to the big committee as well as our data subcommittee, particularly around these research and evaluation studies. So we can go ahead, Renee. So we're just going to present kind of the big picture findings from this SAS, this report we just submitted to the state board the first week in March, and we also got a chance to present to the Charter School Advisory Board too, of this data that we did in partnership with the EVOS team from SAS. So this report is really different than any report that's come out yet on the impact of the pandemic on K-12. because it was a population study. This was not a representative sample. This was not like a vendor-based assessment where we just had a small little group of students. This was every single child in the state of North Carolina that had ever taken a standardized assessment and every one of their test scores. And so what we were trying to do in partnership with the EVOS team was try to, in a single picture, see the impact of the pandemic on all public school students in the state. So this includes charters and traditional public schools. And so what we did is we worked through these different kind of scenarios, these different visualizations. If you go to the next slide, Renee. Next one, sorry, yeah. So this is the snapshot. This is a statewide summary of the impact of the pandemic on K-12 schools. And so what you'll see for both for this slide and the slides going forward is, if you go back one, sorry. Sure. Sorry. So you'll see 2018 as a business as usual. And this is actually pretty unique. The state has never looked at student growth scores like this before. We have talked a lot about proficiency. We've talked, as a state, have talked a lot about kind of the percent of students that are passing their end of course, if they're on grade level. This is an individual student's projected versus actual scores. So where they were expected to have been in 2018 compared to where they actually were in 2018. And then we needed a way to look at what is the impact of the pandemic, what happened in 2021, and that's what you see on the right. That is the average student's difference, basically, between predicted and versus actual scores for all subjects, all grades. And so, and statistically, the way to represent this is these effect sizes. That's what you'll see along the bottom. But we decided to go with this chart because a lot of people don't, like general public, legislature, they're not taking stats courses to understand effect sizes. So it's really about the picture. And what's important here is that anything bigger than a 0.2 is a medium effect. Anything, when you start getting out into negative 0.4, negative 0.5, that is a significant amount of learning loss that happened, that impacted our students. And what you typically see is that it's what you kind of want to see, what you see on the 2018, is the students are clustered around the 0. That means they made an expected year of growth. And you see a little bit of variation, so for whatever reason, our students seemed to be ahead of expected growth in biology on state average when you look at 2018, a little bit ahead for reading grade 7, but then when you look at 2021, what you really see, this is a picture of the impact of the pandemic. One of the things our office is doing right now is working on a way to convert this to months of loss. So we'll be able to give some estimates around, this is about half a year of loss. And so what then it'll allow, our superintendents and curriculum coordinators is to think about how do we accelerate learning for students in those grades, in those content areas. So if we go to the next slide, we asked SAS to pull out, we did it, this report has like 27 different charts in it. This is, I think we just pulled a handful for this conversation, since I only have 10 minutes. And so we wanted to test some of the early theories, right? Like some of the stuff we saw when it first came out was, our boys, they're gonna struggle so much learning at home. They're gonna just be, and what this showed was that was not the case. It was our girls, our female students were didn't meet their expected growth as much as the boys. Now, part of that has to do with the fact that typically they outperform. They tend to have a higher, kind of a steeper slope of their growth line. But at the same time, and so as we were kind of talking to the state board, as we were talking to our charter school advisory board, the intent of the work that our office is doing, that I have always really tried hard to do, is to make the data actionable, right? Like, so what? So what do we do with this? So for this one, the recommendation I said was, so as districts, both as a state and then as districts and charters begin to look at this data at the local level, like think about how we could target interventions to help address some of this learning loss to specific student groups. So what could we do for girls in grade 5 for math? That using the data to kind of target your resources and your intervention is how we want to be able to use and make this data actionable. If you go to the next slide. For race and ethnicity, we saw negative impacts for every single race. And I think if you go to the next slide, Renee, I've got a kind of a crazy, so again, I know this is a lot. This is a lot to see, but what's important from a leader from the presentation is how different the pictures look, how different the patterns look for these students. And I know we heard earlier we have an advocate for the Native American Indian populations in our schools. They were hit the hardest. You know, when you think about the gaps, the expanding gaps between black students and white students and black students and Hispanic students. So again, how can we target our resources? You just heard Alex kind of talk about the fact, I mean, it's a lot of money, but it's not infinite, you know, and when you start thinking about 1.4 million students, how can you as a local leader, as a state leader, how can we target some of these interventions to help address some of these students disproportionately impacted by the pandemic? I will say we do not know what's going on with English 2 here. You see it across in every chart. I'm like, I don't know what's going on with English 2. So part of our conversation over the next couple of months, and I started pushing out emails about this on Monday, was taking these charts to the field and talking to teachers about like, what is going on with English 2 and how can I test that given the data that we have? Or what is going on with our Hispanic students in rural counties? Like being able to cut the data in different ways, come up with some hypotheses, and then test that in the data. Yes, ma'am.
In English 2,
this is Miss Lucy Edwards.
Oh, I'm sorry. In English 2, do you think that may have been impacted by lack of teachers in the classroom? Because I know in our district, that was a problem.
Is English, the students in English 2 outperformed all the other, it's that
Oh, yeah,
one
I got
on the
you.
right
I'm
side.
looking at the wrong
No,
thing.
that's
Yeah,
okay.
gotcha.
And so if you go to the next slide, you can see it on every single slide. It like shows
I'm
up.
looking the wrong
And
way.
so some
I'm
of the
sorry.
things that we've heard is that English 2 content standards are really just, they're like going deeper on the English 1 content standards. So if the students got it in English 1, and then they were at home and just had more complex text, I don't know. I'm not an English, so I'm like, I need to talk to the English teachers in the state to help me understand that. This one is looking specifically at economically disadvantaged students, and this one to me was a pretty big gut punch to this because we were not perfect, right, in the state, but in 2018 we were making progress. We were closing gaps. And then 2021, you see like the bottom drops out for a lot of these students, and when you're thinking about targeting resources, these students, these economically disadvantaged students, and the families that serve the families who are our partners in this work. If you go to the next slide. This was another one that was really surprising, I think, and I'm interested to get some feedback from the AIG coordinators in the field. Is we heard, oh, the AIG kids are going to be fine. They're going to be fine. They're going to be at home. They can learn on their own. But when you look statewide, that is not true. They were significantly negatively impacted by working at home. And there are some theories again about, they really flourish in kind of social collaborative workspaces. And so, I mean, who knows? Like that's, again, some questions that I think it's going to be really important that we ask our folks in the field that were in this, in our front lines during that 2021 school year. Yes, sir.
Is this consistent around the nation?
Well, so, you know what, we don't know yet. North Carolina is one of the first states that's not only looked at their data in this way, but released it. SAS has, the EVAS team partners with 7 other states, but but the only way we were able to get this data done and this analysis done as quickly as we were was because SAS already had all of the data. Like there's no way that you could create a new partnership, get them all the data, get it linked, you know? And so we're literally not just one of the only states that had the data systems to be able to do this, but the EVOS team was like, and y'all are being super transparent about this. Y'all are like, this is what it is, you know, at least now we know, you know, and I think, and so they were super complimentary about our willingness to kind of push this out. But if you go to the next couple of slides, there's still some more, like, I think the next one, Renee, students with disabilities. Oh, sorry, the students with disabilities one. This one was, and I have my colleague Sherry Thomas here, was really surprising. Students with disabilities on average performed better than the general student population when looking at their individual average growth. And, you know, this is another one where I want to get in front of the EC directors and in partnership with Sherry's team and start thinking about why, like, what are their theories about why this result might have happened, and then are there ways we can test those, and also look for like promising practices. Are there districts that really outperform with this population? And we know with a caveat that from a proficiency standpoint, these students are not where we want them to be. You know, that overall they are not performing as a group as high as we want, passing with the same pass rates as the general student, but from a growth perspective. And I think what Dr. Thomas has helped me to understand is this is something you guys have been advocating for a long time, that growth is something that we build into the EC kind of, and the students with disabilities, and understanding where they really are. Yes?
This is Tan Truth. I wish we had more time.
Oh, I know.
This is absolutely amazing. So we're learning the impact. So now the team is going to explore the data to see what interventions work for which populations or something. Okay.
So I just literally just sent out like a gazillion emails on Monday. Like I'm ready to now that I have these up, and I literally am envisioning. So y'all invite us, or if y'all want to be our ambassadors to do that, like bringing these slides and being like, what do you guys see in this data? Help me think about like theories that we could test or interventions where you weren't surprised at all by this, and that could, you know, are there ways that, because we want to lift up those promising practices based on the data. And similarly, the next slide, the English learners, exact same thing. I mean, there we go. So you see a similar pattern in the English learners that they kind of outperformed the general student population. And why is that happening? We don't know. Like this helps us. This gives us like the what, but not the why. And so that's kind of our next evidence. You know, it's gonna take a minute, but I think it's the right way to look. I think it's the right way to approach the work, and really open to like I said, to representatives of this committee to be invited to things, especially where there's already a convening of people, and I can come in and share this information and ask for feedback. I'm really always open to doing that. Okay, so I think I probably took more than 10 minutes. I'm sorry, Dr. Brendan. And let's see, do we have?
Yeah, I don't know if you have questions.
Sure.
I have one more. It's okay.
Yes.
Sure.
So I know your time at the Friday Institute, there was deep study into online learning, online engagement, what it means to build the capacity of educators, school districts, etc. Do you think this is a measure in which we can now see the readiness of districts to engage in virtual learning and online engagement?
So readiness of districts. So we are going to be doing, we're going to be looking specifically and trying to get a better, more precise measure of like in person. We're trying to figure out if there's some sort of sweet spot where if kids are in school, if they're, you know, using this data, if kids are in school 150 days, I'm just making that up, and that there are 30 days online, like, that there's an, you know what I mean, like that's a sweet spot where, because then it would be making a recommendation around some flexibility that is very precise and data based. And so I think we're looking to do some of that kind of analysis, but I do think, Terrence, that absolutely a district's readiness, like I would love to even look at the districts that were already 1-to-1. I was thinking about this, like Rutherford County had been 1-to-1 forever and a day, and then this switch happened, and really for them the issue was having everybody, like the broadband issue is more in that area, but they had been 1-to-1. Their teachers already had their lessons online. It was a much easier kind of switch for them, and so I think we definitely could think about that. Based on some of that work we did at the Friday Institute. But it's a little bit different, like, not a little bit, with the pandemic, just because of the fear, you know, and the health crisis that went along. But you also hear about those counties, you know, in the southeastern part of the state that haven't had a normal school year in 5 years because of the hurricanes. There's a lot of, like, when somebody was asking about literature, the disaster literature, like, if you look at what happened to the New Orleans schools during Katrina, that's the closest thing that from like a what's in the research that would replicate what we saw for the 2020-2021 school year. But yeah, so looking to that literature, I think is where a lot of the researchers are pulling from initially. I mean, still this is different, pandemic's different, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
We're going to keep going.
Okay, yes ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Ford.
Mm-hmm.
So at this time, we're going to continue down our agenda, and we'll ask Mr. Clifton if he would now present to the committee on the new 2022 teacher working condition items and 2020 remote learning survey results.
Do you want me? Okay, yeah. It's up to you. I mean, whatever we can. So we could just talk briefly about these items with TWC, and then maybe set it up for the next meeting and we can share the memo out so you guys can see, and then we could maybe talk about it. Yeah, yeah. So one of the first things when within my first month maybe of being here, the Teacher Working Condition Advisory Council was meeting because they were getting ready to finalize the items that were on the Teacher Working Conditions for 2022. And this is, for those that don't know, this is every other year. I mean, it's like 90% response rate. Every teacher in the state completes this. Principals use this data, superintendents, district staff, and it's really about the working conditions inside the school. North Carolina has been doing this for, 14 years. 16 years, long time. And so the Teacher Working Condition Advisory Council asked the question, well, shouldn't we put a couple of questions on there about COVID? And I was like, oh, that's a really good idea. And so what we thought, we didn't want to start from scratch. So we wanted to think about, have any surveys gone out that would be either nationally or in North Carolina, that ask questions about remote learning that we could maybe have some parallels for. And so we found out, luckily, that our State Board of Education had partnered with EPIC, which is a group at UNC Chapel Hill, to roll out this 2020 remote learning survey. And so we pulled 4 items. So Renee, I think if you go to the next. Yeah, and so we basically pulled 4 items to add onto the teacher working conditions that we also have data for in 2020, from fall 2020. And so one is asking teachers about what % of their instruction has been spent on reteaching prior grade standards. It's a way to kind of gut check what we see, or as like triangulate what we're seeing in the SAS report. There's another one about students' needs for social, emotional, and mental health supports. This is a very real concern for so many leaders around the state. And this was a question that got asked in fall 2020, so we can see what teachers are saying now. And again, this is like a population study. It's like 80 or 90% of all the classroom teachers in the state. And then also asking teachers to estimate their students' current academic progress as compared to past academic progress at the same time. And then letting us know their 5 issues of most concern. It's just a way to get some feedback from an existing survey, like from teachers around the state. I think if you go to the next slide. So, yep, I already talked a little bit about that. Next slide, Renee. And so and we're actually going to be sharing out, this is one of the things, this is what we're presenting on Thursday to the superintendents, because for whatever reason, just given all the things that have been going on the past year and a half, is this data was never shared out with everybody. And so we've got data for Edgecombe County for teachers that participated in fall 2020 that asks, and this count is for statewide, but I mean, so we have a snapshot from 12,000 teachers from around the state, 800 principals. So we'll be sharing this data out on Thursday with the superintendents and offering, if you guys want your district's data. Kaylin actually has been pulling that together for us. And so with this group, we can share this slide deck that has the findings, and then maybe we could just revisit it next meeting or with the data subcommittee. Yep.
Can I have just a minute to just kind of hit the 4 highlights we have here? So, Kaylin Clifton, Research Analyst, Office of Learning, Recovery, and Acceleration. Glad to be here. Like Dr. Coyne just said, Remote Learning Survey, a collaborative project between our partners at Chapel Hill and the State Board. On the slide here is just a summary of the kind of 4 findings that correspond to the questions that will be featured on the upcoming Teacher Working Conditions Survey. And the survey was delivered back in fall 2020, so this is kind of a historical baseline for those measurement points. The first one there was that staff concerns differed by role. And I'll send out this memo that we've typed up so you can dig more into it, and you have the slides as part of today's agenda. So staff concerns differing by role, that means that teachers were concerned about this, but maybe principals were concerned about something else. These were 11 different concerns ranging from things that are traditionally associated with schools, such as assessment, to things that are more so associated with COVID, such as returning back to school, planning for future closure, and the health and safety of students and staff. The second point, most teachers were unable to consistently deliver new content between March and June of 2020. So while schools were closed, only about 27% of teachers were actually delivering at least some new content. And it differed a little bit by things like grade level, subject, and even teacher experience. So for example, teachers were more likely to teach new content in the higher grades than in the lower grades. Experienced teachers were more likely to continue to push forward with content delivery. And teachers in math, for example, were more likely to teach new content than teachers in ELA. Number 3, most staff, especially teachers, spent much more time on social emotional support in fall 2020 than pre-pandemic. So that suggests that teacher effort may have been moving away from instruction to supporting non-academic needs of students. And there's also some evidence in the data to suggest that with every day that went by, teachers began to shift more and more effort to social emotional support. And then last but certainly not least, teachers reported a negative impact on academic progress for most students. So in the data, the teachers were asked to reflect on, do you think this subgroup of students has experienced at least some loss? And you see that the overwhelming majority of teachers say that the overwhelming majority of students have experienced at least some loss. And again, there's some variance there by grade level where teachers in elementary grades were more likely to report loss than teachers in high school grades, and some things like that you can see in the slides. But moving forward, I will send out the memo and hope to revisit this coming soon.
Thank you. Great information. I know the superintendents will love to get their hands on.
Yep.
Okay, so again, we thank both Mr. Clifton and Dr. Horn for their presentations. We asked Ms. Barber if she'll now open the floor for the subcommittee and the schedule updates. I think we're trying to get back on track.
So this is a 1-slide update. Our team has chatted with Dr. Bridges and we have proposed moving forward with a quarterly large group meeting and then meeting as a subgroup. You can see here, I'm not going to read the names, the data, the policy, and the programs. So Jenny will be the chair for the data subcommittee, and then Michael for the policy, and then myself for the programs. And so we will be meeting as needed. As a subcommittee, we plan to do those virtually. probably once a quarter at most, and then reconvene as a group once a quarter again. So this is March. So June would be our next large group meeting. We do have work to do within each of those subcommittees, so we just thought it'd be a little more productive to meet in the subcommittees so we can actually get our hands a little bit dirty as opposed to our office just talking at you so much. So that's my only update with this slide.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions or comments regarding committees or anything that we've talked about today? Okay, wonderful. So we will turn it over to Dr. Aaron Manuel and the Mentimeter results for our get to know you exercise that we had at the beginning of our meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Bridges. First of all, thank you all for everybody who participated in the Mentimeter results. And if you can see on the screen here, I'm just going to share out the results quickly. So in terms of I am a student advocate, it shows here on our Mentimeter that our elementary, middle, and high school students were mostly represented by 7 members participating in this particular Mentimeter. And that was followed by race and ethnicity, students with disability, economic disadvantage. There were 4 responses for those particular students. And English language learners were following then after that, and then we had our justice involved, military connected, student experiences homelessness, students in foster care, charter, and homeschool was following then after that as one response. Does anybody have any reflections about the student advocate Mentimeter? Any surprises?
Oh, I'll just say, I mean, one of the things that's unique is that many of our students cut cross many of these categories, and so it's really hard to just select one.
Yes.
Right? Yes. And I think I went and selected one at first and then went back and then selected another one. But many of our students sit at the intersection of so many of these different categories that, you know, as we continue to do this work, we represent them, how they show up in our classrooms in many different ways.
Absolutely. Any other reflections?
Great activity. I think it really helps us think about our students and all the different parts that they bring to the table.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for participating.
Absolutely. So that, again, we thank Dr. Manuel and Dr. Korn for the activity. Certainly can reuse that in your own spaces and hope you will. So we're at the point of adjournment unless there's anything else that's on anybody's mind. Just want to make sure I covered everything. We're good? Okay. So at this time, I'll thank you, committee members, advisors, and staff for your preparation and for the discussions. I'll remind the committee members that our next monthly meeting will be held Tuesday, June 28th, 2022 from 3 to 5 p.m. And we've now completed our meeting. Unless there's additional business at this time, I ask for a motion to adjourn our meeting.
Madam Chair, I move to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Let's go get nachos.
Whatever. Thank you. We have a motion and a second and a request for nachos to adjourn the
Sure that gets in
session.
there.
Any discussion?
Any discussion on that?
Yeah.
Have a great evening, and we will see you on June 28th at 3 p.m.
I'm serious. I drove from Charlotte. It's
Hilarious.
Yeah, where do we go around here?
Okay. Funny. Enjoy your trip.
You really bust on me.
Wasn't it interesting? I literally would have laughed. I would be like right now.
I'm like,
Can you read them? Make sure you're they were like,